Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Annalyn Schooley, current president of the Florida Family Therapy Alliance. It is my pleasure today to introduce Jordan Deitch. Is it Deitch or Deitch? I've known you for so long and only ever called you Jordan.
I know, right?
So,
It's actually
yeah,
ditch,
Ditch, like the
curveball
one
there.
when you dig to lay cable. All
Mhm.
right. So Jordan Ditch is here, and she has a fascinating practice of working with neurodivergent clients. And there isn't a lot out there about neurodivergence from a systemic perspective. You can get training that either focuses on ADHD or OCD or autism, but to really look at neurodiversity from a systemic perspective, that's a little harder to find. So Jordan, if you would please just introduce yourself while I make you the host, and you can start sharing your PowerPoint.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the introduction. It is awesome to be here. I have been practicing um, for coming up on about 3 years now, and I've had the privilege of working with a variety of neurodivergent folks, um, and to also um, better understand and navigate my own neurodivergence. So I feel really, again, privileged to be able to kind of share some of the stuff that I have come across, stuff that I've learned, um, and to hopefully offer some insight onto how to look at it more systemically as well.
So you're ready to go. Go ahead and share your screen.
All right, you got it.
And Jordan, will you invite questions along the way, or should people wait to the end? Or you could always put it into chat, and I can monitor the chat.
Yep, I think utilizing the chat option would be
That's what we'll do.
awesome.
Great.
Yep, and
So
then at the end we can kind of
very good. Very good. So
compile
as
something.
questions occur to you, feel free to put those into chat, and I will then monitor that. Great.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley. So I appreciate you guys being here and your interest in the topic. I like I said, have been working with a variety of neurodivergent folks, um, and am really excited to talk more about how to not only recognize but support neurodivergent clients and their systems. Um, so today, I'm going to kind of look over the term kind of briefly, and talk about ways to recognize different traits and aspects of neurodivergence, also approaches to supporting neurodivergence in session, and also outside of session. I want to emphasize that these are just my perspectives. These are things that I've learned, things that I have come to understand, um, information that I have gathered. I do refer to some sources through this, but it is not exhaustive by any means, and it is not representative of, anything outside of my own perspectives and what I have come to understand from information and research out there. So I'm hoping that by the end of um, our time together today, I'm hoping that we'll be able to identify 5 characteristics associated with neurodivergence, as well as multiple behaviors, myths related to neurodivergence. Um, and then several methods for during sessions supporting, recognizing neurodivergence, and also multiple referrals and other kinds of resources um, to support between session as well. So to kind of get us started, um, the term neurodivergence is relatively modern, but we can understand that the experience of it is not. Um, it was coined actually by a journalist, um, and it was referencing the phrase neurological diversity. Um, and an interesting aspect of the development of this term and concept is that a lot of internet communities were really involved in um, the development and understanding of what neurodivergence as a concept meant and what it included. Um, there was this kind of turn from pathology to more understanding intrinsic neurodevelopmental differences. Um, as with, most things in the world, there, of course, has been some controversy, some speculation, um, a lot of um, various views regarding neurodivergence, what it means, what's involved. So I'm giving a pretty broad overview of um, a more inclusive, we could say, approach to it. Um, and a more specific example of this speculation is whether neurodivergence is only innate or if it is possible to acquire it. Um, so, a non exhaustive list of what is included in neurodivergence. It really originated in relation to autism spectrum disorder, but it quickly expanded to include ADHD, um, learning disabilities like dyslexia, anxiety, experiencing tics, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, schizophrenia. Um, and there's, um, of course, room for others that have not been discovered or included yet. Um, the research, my understanding regarding um, the concept of neurodivergence is kind of expanding now. So um, again, might depend on who you ask, but this is the more kind of broad, general, inclusive overview of neurodivergence. Um, I did mention that I am myself neurodivergent. Um, I um, I definitely feel like it gives me an advantage working with neurodivergent clients. Um, I find that the opportunity to relate to their experiences, the opportunity to model being neurodivergent and applying um, a lot of the aspects that I'm going to discuss in terms of managing and navigating and supporting neurodivergence. For myself, self acceptance and self compassion were a huge, huge part of um, figuring things out for myself. Um, and I do recognize that it is unique in itself with the challenges that arise being a neurodivergent clinician. Um, and like I said, it also seems to have its advantages in rapport building and joining. Um, so I may include a spot here and there more about this. I mainly wanted to emphasize that um, it uh, is definitely, um, in my experience, more of an advantage than a setback. And I find that the same kind of concept applies to my neurodivergent clients as well. Um, I definitely encourage a strengths based kind of approach as well. Um, so now looking at how we might be able to recognize neurodivergence in clients, systems, and yes, even ourselves. Um, we'll look at traits and symptoms and um, comorbidity and misdiagnosis as well here. So first, looking at traits and symptoms, as I mentioned earlier, talking about the like origin of the term neurodiversity, um, the turn away from pathology and looking at more like innate differences, or in some cases of um, potentially acquired neurodivergence, the capacity for neurodevelopmental differences. Um, when it comes to the DSM criteria for the specific conditions and disorders that are included under the neurodivergence umbrella, um, they're pretty broad, pretty vague. They do require contextualization um, as to how the traits or symptoms are presenting. um, I talk a lot about the purpose of them. Um, and I can get more specific with that when I talk more about these traits on this slide. But we can think about traits as typically being more innate. They are just kind of ways that neurodevelopment has occurred. Um, this does involve, you know, the genetic aspects along with um, how the environment and the circumstances and the care are for the person. And symptoms, um, I like to look at as more like an acquired thing. Um, so, an example of a trait, we can look at the first one listed here, systemic thinking, which refers to having connections between um, cognitions, memories, um, in relation to sensory input. So sounds, words, even like tactile, olfactory, and gustational sensory input can trigger this hyperconnectivity that creates these like systems of thoughts. Um, so that is something that is just kind of thought to be how the person, how their brain works. Um, whereas an example of a symptom might be like, for instance, an OCD, the obsession or the compulsion. Um, a lot of the time, the systemic thinking gives the predisposition to developing under duress, stress, etc., obsessive and or compulsive symptoms. Um, so there's also arguably there like the trait of obsessive thinking and then the symptom of obsession. So that's how I kind of look at them and differentiate them. Um, it's also really helpful to, like I said, look at the context of the traits and symptoms to also differentiate between um, the different kinds of neurodivergence. Looking at the other traits, I refer to them as overlapping traits because these are um, things that you might see across different aspects of neurodivergence. I mentioned systemic thinking. Um, we also brought up like sensory and informational processing stuff, having differences in doing so. So differences in how the brain actually processes sensory input or information otherwise. Um, this might kind of look like um, having a hyper or hyposensitivity or reactivity to noise or to tactile senses. Um, with informational processing differences, this might look like having to further process through the frontal cortex a joke because a systemic brain takes it literally, specifically in autistic brains, um, takes it literally, but with a little extra processing, you can get that, oh, this person's being playful, they're joking, kind of thing. Um, we also see a lot of differences in executive functioning, which can relate to the systemic thinking and the sensory and or informational processing differences. Um, executive functioning differences um, can include um, things related to attention, impulsivity, emotion regulation, things like that. Um, brings us to the next trait, social differences. Um, and these are pretty broad, pretty vague. I understand. So to be more specific with social differences, this is referring to the different traits and symptoms that can impact how we process social situations or how we are able to understand them. Um, and sometimes this can look like for ADHD folks. Um, Missing social cues because of distractibility or because of the brain picking up on one specific thing going on in the environment and not being able to process the social cue happening. Um, for autistic folks, it might look like missing the social cue because the brain just isn't processing social things in the same way that um, one might see for neurotypical folks, which neurotypical refers to those who are not neurodivergent. And there's also, that's another kind of example of a little controversy and speculation there on, um, if the the term neurotypical um, is the most, I guess we could say, linguistically accurate. Um, but I digress there. And then the last trait I want to talk about, um, it's sort of more like a symptom, but it unfortunately has become like so deeply ingrained in our like social navigation that it is more trait-like, honestly. And that's masking or camouflaging. which that refers to trying to behave in ways that diminish, minimize the different traits or symptoms that um, a neurodivergent might experience or display. Um, so, for instance, I can pull from a personal example for myself. I developed what I refer to as internal echolalia as a way to mask my external echolalia. Um, as a child, I um, had some social challenges from repeating people because people took it, unfortunately, as a mocking kind of thing. Um, so I learned how to mask that by doing it internally in my brain instead. Um, and this can be seen across, from my understanding, basically all aspects of neurodivergence. Um, and these all kind of tie in together, um, working as a system. Uh, Going forward, we're looking at different sources to improve recognition. Of course, education and training. I do mention some resources later on here regarding that. Um, Another big one that I have come across is anecdotal content from neurodivergent folks, especially neurodivergent clinicians. Um, Leading up to the third source, consultation with professionals who are themselves neurodivergent and or otherwise educated and trained regarding neurodivergence. Um, I have found that personally extremely helpful, and I've gotten feedback from so many colleagues that the same um, type of consultation they have found incredibly helpful in um, their practice. And then lastly is building the skill of differential diagnosis. Um, that differentiation aspect seems to be pretty helpful for being able to recognize accurately and effectively. Um, in the same kind of realm of recognizing, what neurodivergence can include, um, we got to recognize the possibilities of comorbidity, the range of presentation that symptoms and traits can have in neurodivergence, and the potential for misdiagnosis. Um, Research has indicated that there is a fair amount of comorbidity for neurodivergent conditions with other psychiatric, such as like mood or anxiety disorders, as well as other physical conditions, specifically like gastrointestinal um, and conditions related to like chronic pain. Um, my understanding is that there's a lot of theories regarding how these comorbidities could exist, um, how the uh, potential contribution of genetics and societal influence and whatnot. So research there seems to again still be expanding because there are so many symptoms um, and therefore a variety of combinations of those symptoms. Um, and then you throw in any comorbidity, you can get a really wide range of presentation um, for neurodivergence. Um, I remember a quote from Temple Grandin. Um, where she says, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Um, and even though there are so many similarities, so much overlap, um, it's kind of how there are so many similarities and overlap in humanity in general. Um, there is still the uniqueness and individual kind of differences as well that create this intersectional kind of um, specific presentation from person to person. Um, because of the comorbidity, range of presentation, also things I'll be talking about momentarily, like stigma and misconceptions, things like that. The potential for misdiagnosis appears to be, um, unfortunately, present. Um, there's, my understanding, not a ton of research into this specifically, um, but it seems to be that this is on the radar. Again, seems to be part of that expansion of research into neurodivergent aspects. Um, Now we can look at supporting neurodivergence in client systems and, of course, ourselves. Um, we're looking at just approaches for in and out of session. And then again, I'll talk more about that stigma aspect. Um, so these are some general kind of approaches that I have come to personally utilize in practice. First and foremost, acceptance and compassion. Um, I cannot emphasize that enough for ourselves or for our clients. Usually, as humans, we are much better at doing it for others than ourselves, but it goes a long way, even a little bit for ourselves, which then in turn allows us to do so for others as well. Um, so that um, having that and also encouraging that in clients and their systems. Um, One thing that I want to make sure I mention is I function primarily from a narrative perspective. Um, so I am um, very interested in the system of um, values and how discourses and narratives have informed family patterns and dynamics and understanding of each other and themselves. Um, so, a lot of these kind of more broad um, ideas I personally apply from a narrative perspective. So, acceptance and compassion. That's kind of like part of um, understanding the person. Um, I see a lot of this come to play for me with externalization, for example. Um, and while I personally function from a more narrative standpoint, I do want to make sure I mention that this is applicable across so many models and theories. Um, So it is kind of taking these broad strokes and finding the alignment in the specific approaches and interventions that you utilize from whichever models and theories that you practice with. Um, Going on to the next approach is recognizing the interchangeability and fluctuating efficacy of approaches. Um, with neurodivergence, um, there is often a level of fluidity, even for autistic folks who often, find themselves very um, comfortable in routine and experiencing um, distress at change and whatnot. Um, Even in those circumstances, there is, from my understanding and experience, a level of fluidity where sometimes something that the client might have typically been receptive to may not, may be less receptive to another time. Um, and that ties in with the fluctuating efficacy of approaches and tools that we use is, there may be a range of how effective it is. So we might have to, I call it, um, take out other tools from our toolbox. These are options rather than steadfast, universal sort of directions, we could say. So accounting for the need for interchangeability and the existence of that fluctuating efficacy to have flexibility in how we're approaching supporting neurodivergence. Um, this is also something that seems to be really helpful to encourage in clients and their systems, recognizing the same concepts. Um, because uh, it gives more options to how to address stuff between sessions as well as within sessions. Uh, the next approach that I have cultivated, I look at it as accommodation and flexibility. Um, Learning ways to accommodate for specific traits and symptoms in a way that does not pathologize, nor perpetuate any unwanted kind of patterns or behaviors and whatnot. So, an example of accommodation um, might be, um, for instance, um, sometimes I have folks who experience periods of nonverbal. Um, they are able to otherwise communicate with me through my accommodation and coordination of accommodation of finding alternative methods of communication. So primarily, this ends up being like text or writing. Um, but I have also found some development of like almost like our own language type of thing. um, so that kind of accommodation, being able to be flexible where, um, you know, something may happen that kind of puts a wrench in the way the client can participate, being able to adjust and find ways to allow for participation in a way that aligns with what works for them, their traits, their symptoms. Um,
Jordan, we had
mhm,
a quick question. Can you give
yeah.
an example of using language differently? You know, you said that sometimes between you and clients, you have kind of your own
Mhm.
language. Can you give us an example of that?
Yes. So um, this one I found happens often with my kiddos. Um, a lot of the time, we develop a way to communicate with facial expressions and sounds.
Mm.
So, for instance, um, there was one instance where it became that. Um, certain facial expressions were to indicate certain things. So a kind of like glare and the noise that accompanied it would indicate what kind of glare it was. So if it was like a sassy glare, it might be like a, but if it was an angry glare, it might be more of like a type of thing. Um, so that is one example of kind of like developing language. Also, with my kiddos, emojis end up being a pretty useful way of trying to communicate when words just don't seem to be working out.
Mhm. And so are you saying that sometimes you'd be literally in session, both of you texting each other right there in session?
Using the chat feature typically,
Yeah.
because
Oh,
keeping HIPAA in mind. Yep,
Like in a Zoom room. Okay,
yep,
gotcha.
yep.
Gotcha. Okay. So you moved away from the visual so much as so you would expand that chat window and then you'd be
Mhm.
exchanging. I see. Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, and then
Thanks.
sometimes it might be, they may physically write it or physically draw it and then show me,
Mhm.
using the video feed.
I can imagine that for a lot of clients or a lot of therapists, for a client to go silent on them would be really confusing and frustrating and, pull the rug out and have no idea what to do. So, having a whole series or a whole set of options like you've just described would make that, as you said, much more fluid. Okay, we're going to the nonverbal stuff today, or we're going to
Mhm,
writing today, and then not to have that not be a barrier for the therapy process. Okay, thanks.
mhm.
Sorry
Yeah. Oh,
for
no,
dislodging you there.
no, I appreciate the question. Um, so yeah, that is, the specific example of the language aspect. Um, of course, this is again able to have such a wide range of specific applications for accommodating um, for kind of from a neurodivergent clinician perspective. um, for instance, one accommodation that I have had um, for myself is scheduling 15 minutes apart, so that I don't have overlap. So I have time to transition from one session to the next. Um, and then you can also apply this in systems where, we might accommodate for, yes, the client, but we'll also understand that a lot of the time neurodivergent clients have neurodivergent relatives. And so that accommodation idea can also extend to them. It can also extend to the idea of accommodating for the living experience of having a neurodivergent child or sibling, other kind of significant um, relation. Um, that sort of idea can be applied across the board
Mhm.
in each context.
And of course, you have your entire wardrobe of fidgets. Yes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I have a variety of different sensory um, items, we could call them. A lot of them are fidgety type of things, um, but there are other sensory based things that, come into play. So that's another kind of example of accommodation is accounting for the sensory aspect. And for instance, sometimes I have kiddos where like it's part of our routine that they pick out a fidget for session so that they can have something to occupy that hyperactivity or the anxiousness or something, um, using sensory
Mhm.
aspects.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I could easily visualize, inviting every member of the family to have their own, choose their own sensory device, and
Mhm.
so that everybody is doing something, and so that no one person, is standing out as divergent from the group, but just
Mhm.
diverse among the group. So, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me to expectation management. This is not only for ourselves as clinicians, but this is another thing to encourage folks to have for themselves and systems to have of themselves and the parts of the system. Um, so this for me mainly refers to um, honing expectations for the system, whether that system is an individual, family, couple, what have you. Honing your expectations for the system, their capacity, their range of traits, symptoms, um, experiences, beliefs, personality aspects, etc. Um, and understanding that there may be that fluidity in capacity and in trait presentation. I can't tell you how many times that I have thought to myself, man, my ADHD is popping off today. It be like that sometimes. Um, so having that expectation management to recognize these things and adjust, accommodate, be flexible. And then that also kind of leads into accountability and consistency. Again, applied for us as clinicians and for clients and their systems. Now, this is not referring to um, necessarily the act of holding accountable, um, rather the the act of facilitating alignment with client capacity and goals. Um, and also, holding ourselves accountable essentially for understanding, for bridging any gaps in understanding and figuring out any accommodations, any flexibility that needs to come into play. Being consistent also in our practice, in our striving for understanding and in encouraging our clients and their systems to have that consistency to some degree between sessions as well. So again, these all kind of interweave together and build on each other. Um, so just to kind of show the application of another one of these to like a specific model, again, using narrative, expectation management. I have personally applied a lot to um, the development of whatever externalizing concept that a client and I um, coordinate together. So being able to define such expectations through that externalization. So let's say ADHD is conceptualized as an ankle biting chihuahua who is always pulling attention away and always, trying to get you to play and run around. Um, Being able to understand what the experience of ADHD or this ankle biting chihuahua um, is can help to us to understand what to expect of this range of presentation for neurodivergence in this client. Um, I hope that made sense. I feel like I got a little roundabout there. um, so briefly, talking about, how to know when something works. I personally use multiple sources of measurement. I like to use literal measures. I will refer to some in the resources that I am about to touch on. Um, I also like to develop measures with clients. So rating scales, go a little solution focused. Rating scales for their different experiences or traits or symptoms. Um, and then also involving the system, um, being able to get feedback from multiple perspectives, to really understand um, how something is being taken between sessions, um, which kind of leads us into the the referrals. There we go. That could be helpful. Um, Significant others always pull the system in. Um, Work and school associates and professionals, for kids, especially like their teachers and social workers, anybody. Like one of the biggest questions that I ask when I'm pulling in these sorts of folks is, who knows you best at school? Who's a grown up at school who knows you best? Um, Also looking at referrals for psychiatry or psychology, whether that's for assessment or confirmation of diagnosis, or management otherwise. Um, Social work can also be really helpful, especially for adults with neurodivergence, in terms of finding more community resources and other types of services that may be necessary, like medically or financially, things like that. Um, and then group or specialized therapy or even like support groups can also be really helpful in building skills, understanding, building community, things like that. Um, Really briefly, we're looking at stigma professionally and personally. Um, Unfortunately, um, stigma is very prevalent in a lot of ways still when it comes to the neurodivergent community. There are a lot of misconceptions about it, um, a lot of stereotypes. Um, a lot of the time, um, we think about these professionally, where we're looking at more like interpersonally, how our peers or families are thinking and interacting with us. But it also, um, unf- unfortunately, happens professionally, where clinicians working with neurodivergent clients may hold some, um, whether it is conscious or unconscious bias related to such stigma. Um, some examples of professionally is a clinician thinking that an autistic person um, is antisocial, or anti-society, has antisocial behavior, um, not understanding the social differences that come up for autistic people. Um, an example personally is, for instance, parents thinking that their child with ADHD is just lazy and doesn't care, because they experience so much distractibility and have a hard time finishing tasks, staying on task, trouble with emotional regulation and whatnot. Um, so that's something I wanted to make sure to mention to account for, both for ourselves and um, our clients and their systems. These are the resources that I've been referring to. Um, there's several websites, a couple that I personally utilize a lot, I find super helpful are Embrace Autism and Neurodivergent Insights. Um, Dr. Engelbrecht and Dr. Neff have wonderful resources, like very, very thorough and uh, detailed understandings and differentiations and whatnot. Embrace Autism also includes a lot of screenings to kind of screen for neurodivergent aspects like autistic things, ADHD, OCD, things like that. Um, the DSM's cross cutting symptom measures. They have like their general one, and then they have their more specific ones, the level twos. Um, those can also be really helpful in understanding specific um, clinical aspects um, using specific measures. Um, PESI and AAMFT are really great resources for education and training. Um, the number of trainings on PESI for autism, ADHD, OCD, but then we're also seeing for like the umbrella term of neurodivergence, AAMFT as well. Um, so that seems to be an expanding kind of area. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, anecdotes and content from neurodivergent people, especially clinicians, being mindful of social media trends and misinformation. Um, it can be kind of overwhelming, the amount of content out there, but also really, really helpful to understand the lived experiences and how to apply clinically as well. Um,
So Jordan, before
mhm.
you leave this screen,
Yeah, let me put
um,
that.
would that so that's embraceautism.com? Is that what we're looking for, or neurodivergentinsights.com? Is that what we're thinking?
Yes, so you should
Okay.
be able to pop these into Google. I also did create a resources page where
Okay.
I included more information about all of these, including some of my favorite content creators. Um, so,
Right, and that was one of the things that you sent to me ahead of time, and that has
yes,
already gone out to the participants. So, okay, good. Thanks. Okay.
yep, absolutely. Um, so yes, these resources can be super helpful for recognition and support of neurodivergence in practice and for ourselves. These are just the sources that I referred to. Um, I highly recommend, um, you know, uh, from not only more recently, but like the back in the day information on how neurodivergence as a concept kind of got started. Um, gives a really kind of great illustration of the development over time of the concept. So now, I am happy to um, take any thoughts, questions, feedback, anything. I really appreciate your guys' time and am eager to hear from you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jordan. So, folks, what are some questions or thoughts that you have?
I,
Yes, Arlene.
uh, we read about these things, but it was wonderful hearing it from your voice through your experience. And it just, for me, it just gives me further insight on my responsibility to make sure that I am very cognizant of how I walk as a therapist and leave that area very open to possibilities. So I thought it was great hearing from you. You did a very nice job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You really did.
Any other thoughts or questions? No? I'm aware that there wasn't really anything that I wouldn't already be doing in terms of being flexible and accommodating and all of that sort of thing. And I think sometimes clinicians get all caught up in the diagnosis and then what am I supposed to do? And as opposed to that information is information. And so it's no, that a client lost their grandmother when they were 5 is just a piece of information, and they happen to be particularly sensitive to noises or, that they are easily distracted by the chihuahua at their ankle, is just information. It doesn't mean destiny. It doesn't mean anything other than just information, just like any other piece of information. But then having that kind of broad understanding, and that it doesn't mean anything other than what the client and you decide it means. Very social constructionist, right? You being a narrative
Mhm.
therapist. And I think it's great to watch things like Hannah Gadsby and watch her talk about her experiences. That be an example of anecdotes, um,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So yeah, so I appreciate you doing that. Any other thoughts before we wrap this up? I'm sure that Jordan, if any do come my way, I'll put them on. So I appreciate time and attention for this topic, and I'm pretty sure I have everybody's license numbers. So if you are watching this on YouTube and I haven't figured out how to upload the materials because I'm old and I don't know how to do some of that stuff, you can certainly reach out to FFTA, Florida Family Therapy Alliance.com, and I can get those materials to you. So otherwise, thank you for your attention, and we'll stop the recording now.
Thank you.